from start to finish, if not longer, depending on the complexity of your resource. There's a value to us. We have a preliminary form, fill that out. I'll evaluate it and, based on the information provided. So I can only evaluate what I have and what I know. So the more we don't have the staff and the time to do that, but I'm here to the owner. The National Park Service has bulletins, and of course, these are government bulletins. They're not the most exciting thing to read, but they are helpful. They are a little bit dated at times too. So use the Bullet State Board at the 3 meetings they hold each year. And you see that on the screen here, January, May, and September. The board reviews it. It just does. If you want to do a project or you're thinking about doing a project, I would start researching and reaching out to our office for evaluation sooner rather than later.
Yes, I am Kelly Bacon. I am the Certified Local Government Program Coordinator in SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office. So next slide, please. So what is the Certified Local Government Program? And I'm going to refer to it as CLG because it's a much shorter acronym and way to say the program. So it is a preservation assistance program for communities and counties. And then it provides a statewide and national network of communities and counties that have similar preservation goals. And it's designed to work in communities and counties of all shapes and sizes. And it provides a way to protect historic properties in your community. Like Dave said, the National Register doesn't come with restrictions for private property owners. And if they're using their own money, they can do whatever they want. This is a way that this program can provide a way to protect some of your historic resources. And it's a way to sustain and build strong communities through historic preservation and economic development opportunities, heritage tourism opportunities, that sort of thing. So next slide, please. We currently have 8 CLGs in Nebraska. They are Auburn, Fairbury, Lincoln, North Platte, Omaha, Plattsmouth, Red Cloud, and Sidney. So even just within our 8 CLGs in the state, we have multiple populations and they're dispersed across the state. So, and we are, always, trying to recruit new communities to join the program. And across the US, there are over 2,000 CLGs. And again, of all shapes and sizes, the smallest communities that I know of that are CLGs have a population of about 50 people. So it's really designed to work anywhere. So next slide, please. There are 5 general requirements for a community to be certified as a CLG. They need to pass a preservation ordinance, and that ordinance will provide for the protection of historic properties. And I'm not going to speak a lot about this or anything. I could talk about it forever, but what historic resources are important to your community and how do you want to protect them? It could be that you would have a review of demolition of your historic properties. It could be that you want to review certain exterior changes, like new windows or putting solar panels on the roof or additions or new siding, those sorts of things. So it's that sort of language in your ordinance is up to the Lincoln and Omaha, since we're talking about those communities today. Mostly their ordinances do have some design review for exterior changes. So that ordinance will establish a historical title, and it's a commission with at least 5 people who have an expertise or an interest in historic preservation, architecture, history, archaeology, those real estate, construction, those sorts of fields. And you will also be allowed, you have the ability to survey in your community. One of our other programs is our survey program, and that's when we look for historic properties across the state. This will allow you to be able to do your own survey work. And again, I'm not going to go into that a whole lot, but just know that that is a requirement for you to do. And we will have public participation and education as part of your duties and programming throughout the year. Your commission is a public body, just like your city council or planning commission, maybe a library board, something like that. So in Lincoln and Omaha, those commission meetings are open to the public. So it offers some sort of public education opportunity throughout the year. And the fifth requirement is staff. So we need to have somebody within the city government who oversees the work of the Historic Preservation Committee that, kind of keeps track of that. This, it doesn't have to be a full-time position. Lincoln and Omaha have full planning staff and full-time staff. So it's a little bit different there, but it's not required to have a full-time position working on historic preservation or the work of the commission. So next slide, Ryan, please. So some of the duties and abilities of the commission are to comment on National Register nominations that come forth in your district. So in Lincoln and Omaha, and then for our other CLGs, anytime a National Register nomination would be proposed in those communities, the commission gets to review it and then vote if they think it's eligible for listing in the National Register. And that's for individual listings and districts. And then you can also be a consulting party to Section 106 review and compliance projects. Dave briefly mentioned federal undertaking. So this is that if there's federal funding, permitting and licensing, your commission and historic preservation staff can review and consult on those. And again, I'm not going to go into a lot of that program. There is, potentially design demolition review, depending on the language in your ordinance. Like I said, Lincoln and Omaha, they do have design review. Like for the instance of North Platte, they don't do any design review, but they do review demolition of their historic properties. And then public education, opportunities are great too. So next slide, Ryan. Benefits. The city ordinance will list landmarking is kind of the formal process of determining what your historic resources are. And these are properties then that would be subject to design review in your ordinance. You would establish an ordinance, but that doesn't mean that every single property in your community is subject to that. So in the cases of Lincoln and Omaha, not every single property in those two communities is subject to review in your ordinance. Your ordinance will spell out how you locally landmark individual buildings and districts. And one of the benefits of local landmarking is that those properties could potentially be eligible for the two state tax credit programs, the Nebraska Historic Tax Credit, the NHTC, and the Valuation Incentive Program, VIP. And Ryan will talk in more detail about those programs, but becoming a CLG can open up opportunities for property owners in your jurisdiction, which I think is a great benefit. And we have competitive matching grants available for CLGs for their own preservation projects. The only thing we can't fund is the rehabilitation of actual buildings, but we can help with specs that you may need to be done. It also pays we can help with training for staff and commission members and opportunities for educating the public. And again, you can apply for grant funding for these programs. And then it's a way to promote historic resources, like I mentioned earlier, with heritage tourism, economic development opportunities, trying to get potential tax credits, availability, and then it can increase community pride and identity and reach those heritage tourists that you want to reach in your community. There are studies that have shown that people who are traveling for heritage tourism will spend more money in your community than in a community that really doesn't promote itself as having historic resources. So I think there might be one more slide. Yep. So these are some of the past projects in Lincoln and Omaha. I didn't, list all of them, but Lincoln has done a lot with public education, with brown bags and walking tours. They have done GIS and website development. They've done design standards, which is a great grant project for CLGs to do. They've worked on National Register nominations, and again, with grant funding, and they've completed survey work. Omaha has done a lot of the similar work to Omaha with surveys and National Register nominations. They're currently working on some historic preservation guidelines and design guidelines for both residential and commercial properties. And then they've also done a lot with GIS and website development. And I think that's my last slide. Yep.
Okay, so it's my turn. I'm Ryan Reed. I'm the Tax Incentive Coordinator for the State Historic Preservation Office, the SHPO. I'm also the guy that advances the slides for this presentation. So I'm going to try and quickly tell you about the three different tax incentives that we have that are offered through the federal government and the state government. I've invited Lee Glauser here from the Department of Revenue, the Nebraska Department of Revenue, because one of those programs, the Nebraska Historic Tax Credit, is a partnership program with our office and the Department of Revenue. What we do is we review all the work you're going to be doing to your building. What Revenue does is they look at your expenditures and issue that credit. So she's here to answer any questions you have regarding the tax side of the Historic Preservation Tax Credit for the state. So let's get started. So I'll try to do this as quickly as possible. So we have three different tax incentives that are offered. The first one is the Federal Historic Tax Credit. Identified expenditures, what is that? Well, you have your total project costs. That's everything you're throwing into your act out, you're qualified. So it deals with the mechanics of your building. So HVAC, plumbing fixtures, electrical. And so whatever the qualified expenditures add up to, that is what your 20% credit is calculated to. So you don't get like money right up front for the rehab. It's not like a grant. You have to wait until your project is completed to be issued this credit. With the state, there's two programs. There's the Nebraska Historic Tax Credit. And as I said previously, this is a partnership program between our office and the Nebraska Department of Revenue. Like the Federal Historic Tax Credit, it's a credit towards your state tax liability that's equal to 20% of qualified expenditures. Qualified expenditures are similar to what the feds do. The last one is the Valuation Incentive Program, the VIP program. And this is a property tax freeze for 8 years on the pre-rehab value. And then it increases incrementally for 4 years to the post-rehab value. So this tax freeze doesn't kick in until the calendar year after you complete your project. So if you completed your project in April of 2021, the tax freeze won't kick in until the next calendar year in January 2022. So Kelly and Dave's program on the National Register of Historic Places and the CLG, which does local landmarking with the register, you can go after the Nebraska Historic Tax Credit and the Valuation Incentive Program. Your building's locally listed, you can't go after the Federal Historic Tax Credit. Another thing about these is your project has to be income producing, so it has to be generating money somehow. That's true with the Federal Historic Tax Credit, and that's true with the State Historic Tax Credit. The Valuation Incentive Program, you can have an income producing property in order to use it, but you can also use the Valuation Incentive Program on your house. So if you have a rehab project you want to do on your house, the Valuation Incentive Program would be open to you, but not the federal and the Nebraska Historic Tax Credit. So these are three different programs, and they each have their own application process. But each part of the process is the same. So basically, information you put in, it's information about the significance and appearance of the building to prove that it's a certified historic structure. So your building is a certified historic structure if it's listed on the National Register, or it's locally landmarked through a CLG or a city ordinance, inside and outside of your building. And then a photo psyche to show where all these pictures were taken. The part two, this is the nitty gritty. This is your description of the rehabilitation. So it describes the current condition of the building and the planned rehabilitation work. And so with the part two, we need a lot of pictures. You'll submit pictures of the interior and exterior again, and then you'll show detailed shots of windows, of flooring, ceiling, stairways, bathrooms, just to see what condition they're all in. These will be keyed to a photo key. And then you also need architectural drawings. You'll have to show in those architectural drawings the existing condition, where walls exist, and then what you're proposing to demo, and then your proposed build out. So that's a lot of information you have to put in there. But once that is approved, you can start your work. Once you've completed all the work, you move on to your part three. So when everything's done, you can file a part three, which is your certification of completed work. Basically what this is a lot of pictures, again, of the inside and outside, and it basically proves, yeah, what we said we were going to do in the part 2 and what was approved in the part 2, we actually did. And even if you're not doing work in a portion of your house, we still need photographs of that to show that, yeah, we didn't do any work on this portion of our house. So like I said, the process is similar for all 3 programs. However, there's different ways to apply for each one. With the federal historic tax credit, it's all hard copies. So you have to send in a hard copy of your application. You have to send in hard copies of photos of the site keys in Washington, D.C. So we review that first copy and we make a recommendation to DC. And then DC, the National Park Service, will make the final determination for your federal historic tax credit. With the state historic tax credit, that's completely online. So there's a link on our website you can go to with instructions that lead you through that process of the application. And as I said before, the state is just our office and the Department of Revenue. With the VIP program, that's a hard copy application, and that only comes to us. We only review that. We're in contact with the county assessor, and we give them the information that we've reviewed and if it's been approved, and we're in contact with them, but that's only approved by us. So when we review your project in that part 2, there's certain guidelines we have to follow, and these are called the Secretary of Interior Standards for Rehabilitation. And these are 10 standards which are a series of guidelines about maintaining, repairing, and replacing historic materials, as well as designing new additions and making alterations. And so the standards can be applied to historic properties of all types, materials, construction, uses, etc. And we have to follow these, again, for the inside and the outside of the building. And I don't have all 10 standards listed out here, but this is what they cover. You have to adapt for compatible use and for code, protect and maintain and repair the historic features and materials. So this is part of the integrity of your building that made it eligible to be listed on the National Register or locally landmarked through CLG. So you want to retain those features. Replace missing components in kind where design is known. Got to review the interior and exterior and retain historic character, and review new additions and alterations. So we're pretty much looking at every step that you're doing to this project if you're applying for any of the 3 programs. So as you can tell, there's a lot of planning that goes into this. And we always encourage people to plan ahead and keep us in the circle for when you're talking to your architect, if you're talking to code officials, if you're using other sources of funding. Sometimes our guidelines, don't mesh with their guide. Talk to each other and work something out for something up, and you're like, all right, I took out my windows, got my windows ordered, started working on my roof. That's going to be problematic because we have to look at your windows and see if they're deteriorated enough to replace. They may be in good enough shape where you can retain them. And if you can replace them, we have to look at the windows you're putting in to make sure they're matched the windows you're taking out. So there's a lot of planning that goes into this. And we always encourage people to, if you're thinking about it, just give us a call, ask us any questions you have, big or small. And I just wanted to quickly show you a project that used the federal and state historic tax credit out in Chadron, Nebraska. The center picture is what it looked like when the part 1 came in. So